And these are the things that public educators face every day. And so I think that if we start seeing those as collective problems and stop focusing on, the special kids that make it out and things like that, but ensuring that every kid has access to a high quality education, that's something we have the means to do. We just don't have a lot of interest or political will to do it.
And when that individual comes, I make no apologies for what I'm about to say.
Rough, rugged and real, you're on standstill to obey your case, so let the man build. Words of rapture that you have to capture, and I just slapped ya with a handful of literature. This dope, deaf, fresh, hype, choice, smooth and raw.
Welcome. This is the Simply King podcast. This is your boy Rodney Perry King himself, and you just tuned into the Soulfully Conscious podcast from humans simply being humans. And I have a very, very interesting podcast today with my friend Nate. Now, Nate Smyth is a teacher within Inner City. And I had to have this conversation with him for the simple fact that I feel that not only is he a white man, and I feel like that's a demographic of teachers that you don't see often, but I thought it would be a very interesting perspective to hear on why to teach, why, teaching in the times that we're living in now, all these different things. I had so many questions, and just hearing how he spoke about his love of teaching made me truly intrigued in hearing more about what he had to say. But how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. First, I want to ask you, what made you start teaching in the first place?
That's a pretty long story. So while I was in community college, because, obviously, universities are expensive. So while I was at community college, I wanted to be pre-med. And that's how I started. I started out pre-med and loved science my whole entire life. I jumped around. When I was a kid, I could tell people I went from wanting to be a paleontologist to wanting to be and that was at 4, telling people I want to be a paleontologist.
That's deep.
Yeah. And then after that, I read The Hot Zone when I was in middle school, and I was like, I'm going to be a virologist, and everyone was like, what the hell is that?
What is it?
A virologist, study viruses. Okay. So, and then researching vaccines and formulating them, and and then I wanted, so I wanted to be an ER doctor, because then I was like, I'm good with people. And I was like, oh man, blood sucks. Yes. So I went through a wide range of different scientific fields, but eventually, I settled on pre-med, and I was like, I'll go from there. And your prerequisites, and that's why I'm so people hate prerequisites, and I'm so about prerequisites.
Really?
Yeah. You know why? Because you never know what you're gonna find out of them, and it turns you in a completely different direction.
I get you saying.
So when I was doing those prerequisites, I ended up in a philosophy course. It was just an intro to philosophy, and this teacher.
I love philosophy.
Oh, it was awesome. This professor, but he people can make it so boring, right?
Yes.
You learn about all these philosophers, and they're
I had a great one too.
And they're all at a university. Let's face it, they're all old dead white guys, and this guy was so different. He was he would pose a topic on the board, and he would just have us have a conversation. Yes. And then he would have us fact check it. And then it was almost like a debate that just happened naturally. And I remember the first one was about being eating meat, and I was of course I love burgers, and I was on the side with meat, and there was 2 other people, and throughout the conversation I kept fact checking. I ended up on the other side. Yeah. And I asked him if I could switch sides. He's like, yeah, go for it. And then I ended up being a vegetarian for 7 years after that.
Damn.
Yeah, 7 years. So, but the thing that was the coolest to me was we went over our education system and how flawed it is and how many problems there are within it. And we went over assessments and like how assessments don't actually assess what you got out of a course. They just tell you some sort of number that's pretty arbitrary, and it doesn't tell you who you're going to be as a person. And well, at the end of it, he basically said, if you get what I'm trying to get you to do by the end of this course, I'll give you an A, no matter what you did in this class.
Damn.
And so,
talk about philosophy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I thought about it, and he had a final exam at the end of the course. So I got two people together. The two people who actually, believe it or not, who was the other vegetarians, and we ended up protesting the final. We sat outside of it. We made little picket signs. We said, "Hey, this doesn't assess what we got out of your course." And he played the role real well, because he came in. He's like, "You're gonna fail. You can come sit in at least." So I sat there the whole entire course, or not the whole entire class, and he was like, at the very end, because like everybody else had left, he was like, "All right, you got your A," and I was like, "That's awesome." Like, so and they're, one of the three people, they completely like left. They were like, "Oh no, I'm not going to lose this," because he kept going like, "Oh, you're going to fail," and so like we had a 3-hour conversation after that. We just sat there and just conversed, and it was awesome. And one of the things that he told me, because like we were talking about how we were unhappy with society, and one of the things he told me is like, well, you know what? The big mistake that people make is that if you are trying to change things, everybody's trying to mess things up from the outside in. He's like, why not become a teacher and mess things up from the inside out?
That's deep.
Right. And so that carried with me, and I never forgot that. And next thing I knew, instead of working on, I had most of my pre-med prerequisites. As a matter of fact, that's what that was my associates was in science. Next thing I knew, when I was going to university, I was like, no, I'm going to science education. So.
Damn. I have a great affinity for my philosophy professor too, Dr. Ilya Davis, who is just extremely brilliant. Went to University of Chicago actually. That's awesome. And studied religion. Literally the first book he had us read was a book titled How to Read a Book.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was definitely informative, just in the sense of just like it made you care about not only reading but interpreting things, and he was really big on just the matter of which you speak and saying things, and like truly was one of those professors where words mean things. I'm not going to stop you from using slang and those different things, but when you're speaking, properly, words mean things. Yeah. So don't say that you feel. You don't feel what you're saying. You believe what you're saying, and you need to say it and state it in this way. And he was very big on just language and just how beautiful he loved how beautifully a lot of these kind of very contemporary philosophers wrote, and the fact that they wrote in such a matter-of-fact way you could tell this is where their mind brought them to, and this is what they were truly questioning. And he asked questions just like yours did, and I think I grew an affinity for him because I was one of the few people in class actually wanting to engage with him about some of these things, and also was definitely behind sometimes in my readings, and was so surprised that I would give him the exact bait that he needed to start the conversation. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I love a lot of the teachers that I've had, and I think teachers are extremely, extremely vital with the kind of just the existence of where we are at. I will say that, growing up in the South, it's education has always been interesting. I went to school I'm from Tennessee, and I went to school in Tennessee. And the school, what was interesting about education is what's interesting about education is when your school isn't the best. I think you learn the most about the education system when your school isn't the best at educating their students. I think when your school is has all these accolades and 100% graduation rate. You really don't. I would think that a lot of students really don't understand how blessed they are to be in that situation until it's the complete polar opposite. My school, for instance, I remember my freshman year, they had this like signs everywhere talking about 88% or better, and 88 this and the third, and that was essentially the graduation rate goal. So they wanted to just get 88%. They didn't get 88%, that means essentially the school was going to be taken over by the state, or they would start into those phases of being taken over by the state, which was, I learned too much of what that meant from it being, okay, now that you're on this list, if you make the graduation rate, good, you'll just remain on the list until you continue this progression. Obviously, they did not make 88% my freshman year, but it had nothing to do with me, obviously. So then what happens? They introduce kind of learning counselors or some type of learning facilitators from the state who are now employees in the school. So you literally have people who may not even have anything to do, maybe probably don't even live in my town, who now are probably relocated to my small town to be in my school to literally teach all of my teachers how to teach. And so you can imagine the people who have lost their, who quit their jobs, wanted to change careers, so many things happen. And I think in retrospect, we realize these things, but it was so normal. Every year, I think the last 2 years I had the same principal, but I think in the span of the 4 years, I think we had a new principal. Sometimes we had 2 principals in a whole school year, like literally changing within semesters, all those different types of things, either because people wanted to leave, people got other jobs. It could have been good and bad things. Some people retired, some people actually were more qualified to be, other than assistant principals, to be principal, but they didn't want them to be the principal of my school, but another school, because the whole county wasn't doing the best, obviously.
That's the biggest problem with underperforming schools.
Yeah.
Is that you don't have those consistent relationships being built.
Yes.
Same problems in my building. You have teachers leaving, walking out the door. Mm-hmm. It takes them forever and a day, the kids, to trust somebody when they walk into that door.
I bet.
And I'll be honest, they give them help. I bet. But you can't blame them, because they know that they're just a flavor of the week. And I mean, I've seen students. I literally saw an entire year where they had the students out of 4 teachers had 1 teacher consistently throughout the year. Only 1 teacher.
And not only can you sense that as a student, but like it's I don't know. I can only imagine how much they go home and tell. And I think that's the part that trips me out about. There is this real interesting emphasis on like parents being more responsible for these situations, right? And I feel like I have a weird sentiments when it comes to that, or I guess I'm kind of on the fence when it comes to that, because I do believe parents should do their due diligence in being a part of their children's education throughout. But I think about, if we're talking about students who are in the inner city and they possibly come from a certain type of household, I can bet that mom is unlike what people probably predict and assume, that mom is like just doesn't care about her children, whatever. Actually, it's the complete opposite. She cares so much, she's working so much.
Right. Exactly.
She has to. So that means you gotta get on the bus. I can't just take you to school. I'm not gonna be home when you get home from school. So that means you're literally underage, a minor, and you're gonna have to learn how to be at home by yourself for a few hours. I may not see you only but certain times of the night. I may literally be out of the house, after you, but you won't see me until it's time for your bedtime. All these different things. I don't have money for a babysitter, so I can't pay someone else to be around you and to help you. And you gotta, but I also need you to do well at school. Mm-hmm. Like, I need you to get through this.
A lot.
Like, I think so many, and you see it often. Like, I think it was Key and Peele. I don't know if you watched Key and Peele, but I loved Key and Peele, and they had a specific. I forgot what the sketch they were kind of bringing up, but in the between when they were just talking, they had talked about how like when it's like he was like, you ever notice like the difference in like black college films and white college films? And white college films is always about like, man, school like terrible, blah blah blah. While with black people who are just going to college, it's like, I'm gonna go to college and I'm gonna make it through it. Like it's literally the smallest part, the initiation, just getting through, getting past, just graduating, which for so many people is so normal. It's like, of course you're gonna graduate. Of course, you people making plans on it. People planning senior trips because they know they can do these, because they know they're gonna be in a place where this is just a step towards their lives. And there's so many people of all different, who come from all different backgrounds where this is the situation. And they have to come to school unknown, not even knowing this pressure that's on them. And so many people are lucky enough to have the natural aptitude to honestly some of these things come natural to them. But you have some that need a different approach. Some that need a different type of, stroking to really get them focused on the work. And then also it's the matter of like, so you have that mom, but you also could have a situation where, yes, you have that mom, but it's still maybe other things going on. Still maybe things internally that's happening. It may be things that they just don't understand, things socially that are happening around them, and they're now battling their own identity and all these different things. So you literally have to literally deal with humans trying to figure out things while adults are keeping secrets from them and not telling them a lie, but also putting pressure on them to succeed. And I would love to know. that was my little anecdote. But I would love to know the issues. And I brought in talking about that because, eventually I'm proud to say my class of 2011 in high school was the one that we didn't know this, but they were kind of every year betting on us to get specific scores on our kind of like end of terms, and I think they call them like end of semester or something like that term. Certain tests, certain standardized tests, and if they had a certain amount, then that was a certain boost for the school. My class, my senior class, my just class I came in through, were the ones who kind of gave that first kind of like good look, like obviously this is working. We were that freshman group where our sophomore year, essentially school was taking over and we had this administrator, so we didn't know that they were being told to do certain things, like the teachers had to do certain things, had to teach us in certain ways, had to prepare us for certain tests and teach in this book in a very instead of chronologically, they had to jump around just to get to all the parts before that test.
Did you like that?
I hated that.
But did it work?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
And that's the thing, is I don't think that works, right? Like
no.
there's so many different now businesses that are investing in education,
yes.
Charter schools,
mm-hmm.
and they or there's programs that are occurring that I don't want to say specifics, but that are coming in and they're just flipping schools, and they're mostly, let's teach the test, let's get the best scores, and let's turn the school around. And I don't know, like it sounds like the school that you were at was what many call a turnaround school. Yeah. And so if it was a turnaround school, I'm wondering, like, what did you prefer? Did you prefer it beforehand? Did you prefer it after?
Well, that was my freshman year, so I really didn't get a chance to even create a preference.
Okay.
Of because this was going from middle school education to high school education, so and I think starting out, I think I was pretty average as a student. Mm-hmm. Grades were pretty moderately good. I never really had, was like a failing student or a struggling student. I think it was certain subjects that came easy to me, and it was certain subjects that were, I kind of needed more work on. Never was too troubled though, and that was a blessing. But I think it was once we realized, at least probably by junior year, once we realized that we were kind of like guinea pigs, or in a sense of like, we just have to take so many tests, or all this is these are things that we learned. Yeah, we might be kind of prepared, but also I really don't know nothing. Yeah. I really don't really know this, I'm trying to memorize these things, we're coming up with mnemonics and trying to figure out how we're going to, go through this test. It felt like as if we were, during those times, kind of like constantly in this kind of like SAT prep, ACT prep type of situation. Yeah. And that was a constant thing when it came to those things, but it was camouflaged as just a standard curriculum. But it was so many things I feel like I should have learned and could have learned, but I think that's a whole nother story. But I would love to know, like, what do you believe is, two questions. What do you believe is one of the biggest issues, and what do you believe is one of the most overlooked things about the school system?
Well, so, I could go for days on this. And by the way, like, there was so much, like, I feel like I needed a notebook right now.
What I just
like,
said?
There's so many things, like, I was like, oh, like, and I don't want to, because those are really important things, like, to mention. And so, I guess, like, when I look at, like, the recent history of education, right? Yeah. Like, you have George W., right? And he did the whole No Child Left Behind, which set a huge precedent for standardized tests. Let's base school funding on standardized testing, right? And what are schools going to do? What's the response? Teach to a test, right? So now you got a bunch of kids all that are learning the same things and learning to memorize, just because it's the easiest way to go about it. It's just repetition. And you're literally just keeping kids in a zone of memorization. But then you get, like, the Obama era, and I loved Obama as a president, but not everything did I agree with him about. And one of the things I didn't agree with him about is education, because then you get he starts bringing forth the whole entire idea of merit-based teaching. So he brought forth this thing called the Danielson system, right? And the Danielson system is a system that basically evaluates teachers and their performances, right? So he was more like, oh, let's look at the teachers, let's look at their performances, let's look at what they're doing, and make it easier for teachers to kind of come and go, and make it easier for teachers to, if they're not performing, get fired. And that sounds great, right? Like, because like, there was this big documentary, Waiting for Superman, which was like very pro charter school, and like saying like this tenure system's got to go. And
I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
And, so it's an interesting documentary. And when I first saw it, I was like, at all these feels. And like after that, I was just like, all right. Like, I want to learn more about what's going on here, who's producing this, and they're very, very pro-charter school, right? And basically, like, makes it seem like charter schools are these saviors for, like, these undeserving schools.
Before you answer the second part of my question, because you say charter schools, and I always wonder, because I remember when charter schools started to become a thing, and to put it in context, I was essentially that kind of aftermath class of No Child Left Behind, but it was the first class of any Obama era type of instituted thing. So I was definitely one of those first groups of high school students in the nation who was seeing whatever that is that he was doing. What are the negatives about charter school? Because I think the thing about why so many people, I feel like, do them, why so many parents choose those things, it's because of the kind of the branding of them. They seem like a but what I wanted to say to you was that what are the things about, I guess, charter schools that are bad? Because I believe it's a branding thing. I think it's public schools have this interesting stigma of, like, public schools are like the low grade, generic, it's a toss up. The kids may do well, they may not. If this, the public school doesn't have, like great athletics and extracurriculars, then it's kind of, really nothing and all of that, right? And charter schools gives you this kind of like, so me as a parent who, maybe middle class to low class, I could possibly have another option for my child. They have these special things at this school. Because I actually went to a magnet school. Okay. And it obviously wasn't a charter school, but I think it was that intermediate kind of creation before before charter schools became more of a thing.
Yep.
And that magnet kind of system was us kind of essentially majoring almost in a thing.
Right.
Either something technical, something oriented to maybe business, just some type of skill that you kind of were starting to get the introduction on.
Right.
Why are charter schools so bad? Well, what are the negatives about charter schools? I'll say.
You know what? Like just like anything, there are trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to call them bad.
Yeah, that's what I switched that.
I would like to. I would like to consider them like. I mean, it's a different strategy, but here's kind of the strategy involved, right? Is first of all, the kids, most of it's by a lottery, and I mean, and that's all good and dandy. But like one of the big problems is that they've done studies, right? Like you would think, oh, okay, like these charter schools are this godsend, right? Like, but they've shown no growth. And one of the things is they can kind of also pick and choose who comes in, and they can kick them out very easily. They can kick kids out super easily. So if kids are misbehaving,
you go
back to the public schools. You go, right. And so what happens is now you got like.
Do they base it off of some type of like grading scale? Like, is that already an expectation, or they can really just pick and choose?
I mean, they have like very strict, clear-cut rules, almost militant. So I did some work in a charter school when I was in my undergrad. Okay. And the kids couldn't hug. Kids were not allowed to hug at the high school level, and right.
And that was some type of suppression on kind of like just, I guess, to not encourage sexual type of something. I don't know.
Whatever. I don't know. But like, I mean, also, I mean, like
damn, you can't hug your good.
Right. Like,
Valentine's Day, trying to get on my junk.
And it's it's high school. Like, I mean, that's part. You look back at those times and you're like, oh, those. But
I would get kicked out.
Right. Exactly. And so, I think it's also important to look at what a charter school is. Right. A charter school is a publicly funded business as a school, right? A public school is government funded. So it comes down to, at the end of the day, who do you trust, right?
Yeah.
Do you trust the government to provide the education to you, or do you trust private businesses to give you the education and the appropriate education? And like it can also go back to like Thomas Jefferson, right? Thomas Jefferson, the first thing, a lot of people don't know this, Thomas Jefferson wanted his achievements listed on his gravestone, and the first thing he put down, out of all the things he did beyond like being a president, signing the Declaration of Independence, the first thing he put down was forming the public education system. And so, like, he believed in it. He believed that a democracy needs free education that is untarnished, untainted. Right? And so that's the only way a democracy works, right? Like, you need educated people to vote, because look what happens when you don't have educated people voting. You end up in the position we are in now. Yeah. Right? So, like...
Which is interesting, because it sounded like that was a goal.
Right.
Like, we have set up the government right now because we are the most educated, so we will make decisions for you, but we don't expect to always do that, because you should get smarter as a society.
Right, absolutely. So,
which is happening.
Right, and so at the end of the day, it depends on who you really are going to trust. Are you going to trust businesses to run your children's education, who are for profit, right? Or are you going to trust the government? And both are problematic in their own sense, right? Yeah. And so. And oftentimes it's a state government, but it depends on whether or not it gets real complex, whether or not it's state education or federal education, because there are certain federal mandates and there are certain state mandates, right? Yeah. So, so I think that my problem with charter schools too is that their teachers don't need to be educators.
Damn.
So it's kind of like in the sense of private schools, where like typically private schools will try and recruit the best and brightest, right? Like, and so for example, if I want to take a biology course, they might find some highly qualified biologist, and you're going to pay the money to get in there and learn from that biologist. They'll take a biology bachelor's, right? And they'll work them to death, right? Like, they'll make them do home visits. They'll make them teach more days. And then at the end of the day, they will also pay them about half the amount that they pay a public school teacher. So you see very, very high turnovers in charter schools. You don't see people lasting there very long because they well, first of all, like because it's a business too, so cuts and things like that. Well, and so like, let's say that I, someone who's been teaching for 5 years now, wanted to be in a charter school. I wanted to grow there. I wanted to grow that school. Well, I might be making too much money, and if they need a budget cut. Yeah. Whereas like the teachers who are unionized, they can't do that too. So like you get people who develop their practice more. So, I mean, obviously I'm a little biased, right? Because like I'm in the public sector, but I think that there are people that think that this is a solution, and I don't know. Like I'm a little bit more skeptical of businesses than I am skeptical of what's going on at the state level. Now, federal level, I do actually want to go back to like when I was talking about like the merit-based teaching, because I don't want to sound like, oh, like I'm being picky about like, oh, they're evaluating me now, because every job is evaluated, right? You should want to be better. Right, exactly, and everyone should want to be better. Like that's a big thing. But like I want to get back to that because like I wanted to talk about talk to like how it does affect different schools, right? So if you're a teacher who's merit-based, right, and like part of the Danielson system looks at how are the students behaving in your class, and so you can get rated lower if your students don't behave, if they are messing around and whatnot, and so a lot of teachers, which isn't always directly your fault, right? Yeah. It's not always directly your fault, but what it does is and by the way, like I have to tell you, when you are learning and training to be an educator, they do not teach you behavior management. Yes. It's all philosophy of education. Well, actually, I don't think any of my undergrad helped me, but you go into a classroom, you go into a school, and if you're being rated on that, where are you more likely to go? Are you more likely to go into the suburbs where all the kids are just sitting there ready to learn, or are you more likely to go into a school where the kids have had transient teachers that have constantly left them and they're not going to trust you and they need to take time to trust you? Yeah. Right? And so the behaviors might not all be there, right? Damn, like, you know what I think about? I think about the people who come straight out of college and become teachers. Most teachers start out without even truly being around children like that. Yeah. Like, no matter what age. Right. You've never been around people who are, 10 plus years younger than you for extensive periods of time. You don't have kids of your own usually when you're first starting out as a teacher. You may have done a little bit of, teacher assistant, in your, before the fact. But for the most part, you really don't know how to really manage children. No. I mean, because they're different, And most people don't have kids at that point in time, right? And so, I think there's something to be said. And some of those, and here's, we're talking trade-offs, right? Here's some of the plus side of things like Teach for America or like charter schools is they, these people are coming without teaching backgrounds, right? And so they train them on the discipline, or they have such strict structures and rules that they, like the no hugging, right? Like that allows the teachers to have power within those rooms. And so, but again, it's, it's a trade-off, right? And it's a weird social experiment too. Right. And that's really what you create. Absolutely. And like, again, like all the research that I have read has pointed to that there's no increase and no increase in test scores based on the fact that, charter schools versus public schools. And especially when you cut out, like, for example, charter schools have the opportunities to pass out, to remove students if their behaviors are not on point. They can, certain charter schools can decide on whether or not diverse learners are inside of their school, right? So their scores automatically look inflated and look good, but at the end of the day, when, like most of the studies that I've seen, when you break them down, they're not performing any better than a public school would be doing. And that's a shame, because you saw a city like Detroit who pretty much just knocked down all the public schools and said, all right, we're all businesses, take over, and made the whole entire city charter schools. So,
Damn, didn't know that.
yeah, so I mean, like, and that was a big fear with in Illinois with Browner, right? Like,
Yeah.
He has his own charter school.
And how they were closing down schools. So I remember, where was it, like? Yeah, I think it was like 75, over 75 have been closed down thus far in the past several years.
And you have No Child Left Behind, I think, for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's just a shame. I think going to college, like, I think college is truly the equalizer of education to me, in a way, to really show you how good of a student you are.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, you learn what your scholastic level is, truthfully. Yes, you might have been valedictorian and did all this, but you're gonna see some F's. You're gonna fail something. You're gonna, and I like that about higher education. Mm-hmm. But also, I think it's that element of paying for things and all of that. But I didn't want to forget you to answer that second question.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it was because I forgot it too, and we definitely got on a great tangent. But what is the most overlooked kind of thing about, I feel like, that you've seen about either just the education system as a whole or your specific situation being in the public sector?
Most overlooked thing. Most overlooked. So I think the most overlooked thing is that I don't think we're, and this kind of goes along with when we're talking about, like, solutions to the education system at this point, but the most overlooked thing is that we're not preparing our kids for the future.
Damn. We could just cap it right there, and we could double back on solutions, but because I got a lot to say.
I was going to say,
I got a lot to say on that.
Do you want me to save it?
Yeah, let's save it. But I'm glad that's what you said, though. Cool. That's beautiful. That's, like, perfect. I couldn't ask anything else.
All right.
But let's say, okay, go into this, though. Killer Mike, I'm not sure if you were familiar with him as a rapper.
I love Run the Jewels.
Run the Jewels?
Mm-hmm.
He has been on, like, a press run for the past several weeks because his new show on Netflix called Trigger Warning, right? Yeah. And he had this interesting debate, and it damn near kind of seemed a little emotional on The Breakfast Club with DJ Envy, where he was DJ Envy, and, like, so many minorities who have grown some type of, who gained some type of wealth. The first thing that usually happens, especially within the black community, is you think about the education system that you grew up in, mm-hmm. and the education system you don't want your children to grow up in.
Right.
So what you do is usually you send them to some type of, private school.
Right.
And Killer Mike had a very interesting take on this to me. And that was that he was like, we give up on public schools.
Yep.
He was like, public schools aren't good enough. He was speaking about from a very specific perspective, because in Atlanta, Georgia is a very different place than most places. Because you're a black individual, you feel a lot more empowered in that city than most cities. Because if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, you probably meet the first lawyer you probably ever met in your life, the first doctor, the first black everything, and then also you learn about the history of the city, and you're finding out, like, they've only had black mayors for the past, 25 years. You learn about all of these black millionaires and billionaires who live in the city, who've created things within the city, all these firsts who are from this place. Schools named after a lot of those historical individuals, like George Washington Carver, like Frederick Douglass, and so on and so forth, Benjamin E. Mays, and so on and so on. And so you literally are going to schools named after greats that look like you.
Right.
And he spoke about how, like, these schools are, still teaching these technical skills, or still teaching these things to actually tangibly prepare children for giving them an option. It's like, you don't have to go and do, learn how to, do woodworking, or learn how to, fix cars and things like that. But now you have a skill. Now you know how to do it. So if anything, it's still a benefit on your life, because why? you now don't probably ever have to go to the shop to do half the things everyone else got to do.
Right.
So that now provides some type of thing, some type of peace of mind for your life. And they were going back and forth, saying that and DJ Envy's kind of point was, I don't want my children to go through what I went through. He was like, my education was terrible. I went to school in Queens, and it was, you had fights. It was a very lean on me. If you ever seen Lean on Me, have you ever seen Lean on Me? It was a very lean on me situation type of thing, and that was the whole get up. And Killer Mike kept saying, like, that's the problem with us. Like they're this bad because we don't care. We just take our kids out and we put them in these schools, and they're in environments that they're not truly getting ready for themselves, because they're in environments that truly aren't telling them about themselves. They're in these environments that are teaching this very kind of like, we don't see color, we're just teaching it very abroad, like we're going to teach everyone on the same level. This is, even though it's slightly eclectic in the room and everyone has money and all these different things, we're not going to truly acknowledge the diversity that's in the room and the diversity that's in the world. We're going to still teach you this very whitewashed version of a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
In the midst of you having to deal with the kind of like the social space that you're in, because a lot of kids who are minorities, no matter, not even just black, but just being Asian and all these different things, going to some of these schools, these kids are teased. These kids are still picked on. They're still like targeted because they are the minorities of this private school.
Whether or not it's a joke or not, right? Like some kids are like, think it's a joke, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, it's cool, like we're cool, right? But like they don't realize like the damage that they're doing. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I would love to know, what's your stance on, kind of like, the private school education as well, but like, and people who see that as better.
Yeah.
And I think that was his whole point, was that we shouldn't see this as the best, right? Because they may gain a thing, but they're not, they're still lacking in another area.
Right.
And I've seen this so much. Like I told you before we started, I went to HBCU, and a lot of people that I went to school with were black people just like myself, who went to an all-white private school and just felt like they didn't get enough of their own selves. They felt like they didn't get enough of their own sense of identity. It wasn't like they got tired of being around white people, but they genuinely just didn't know enough about their own history, didn't know enough about people who looked like them, and they longed for that. They wanted that. They wanted to see about that. And they knew they would get that in a place like that, which you certainly do.
Yeah. Jesus, a lot. First of all, I'm going to preface, I agree with Killer Mike. Mm-hmm. Not just because I like his music, but because I agree with his position. But it's a lot to unload, right?
Yeah.
Killer Mike's position, I would agree with. So, and one of the reasons why is because, first of all, and I try and tell my kids all the time, there's one of two things you can do. You can, many people think that, like, oh, I need to get out of my neighborhood. I need to get out of where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal. Is like this. They think education is this ladder to get you out of where you're at.
Yes.
But what about
once you're out?
What about going back and fixing where you were at? Mm-hmm. And not enough people. I think there's an argument to be had that, and I've read plenty of literature on this, of African Americans say, go back to your neighborhood and fix it. Like this education, this education that you get, and if you have a gift, go back and go do something for your community. I want to look up her name, because I read A Woman of Science every day, because we know, in my curriculum, we only talk about old dead white dudes, right? When we talk about scientists, right?
Yeah.
And Patricia Bath.
Yep, she created the procedure to damn near cure blindness.
Yes, yeah. She created. Well, she actually. So she went to Europe to go do that.
Yeah.
But she had a gift. She graduated early. Mm-hmm. She goes And
I feel real good that I knew who she was.
Yeah, that was awesome. So like she's an ophthalmologist, and she goes back and she realizes, oh, well, African Americans have a predisposition for glaucoma.
Yeah.
And she goes back. So she goes back to her neighborhood and says, hey, I know that this is a problem, and I know that eye care is expensive.
Yeah.
So what does she do? She gets a bunch of people to do eye surgeries for free, and she like literally like set up all these foundations to take care of her community.
Beautiful.
And so like that, but that's the thing is like a lot of people think that like education is supposed to be a ladder to get out of your community.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be. It's not a ladder. It's something to improve your community. And there's not.
But I think the thing about that is it's not only there's several elements to that, I believe. There's the element of we're here in Chicago, and you have a person like Chief Keef, for instance,
right.
famous rapper, literally could not stay in the city because he got famous.
Right.
So he couldn't even stay in his own environment because he now is becoming a target to people who need what? Money. So for a lot of people, there's already this innateness or this assumption that's made that if I stay here and I'm now worth something, I love it. If I stay here and I'm worth something, this is what will happen to me. I will be a target, which it's possible,
right?
Because it's genuinely the law of kind of like the law. It is what the projects were supposed to be,
right?
It is an experiment of so many magnitudes because you have limited resources and you have people fight for them. So if it's a person who has more than the next, then this is what's going to happen. But I do. But no, I feel like we're getting to a beautiful place to, kind of, because I think it's interesting. I think that's why educators, and this is why it's getting to the kind of like nitty gritty to why I think it's vital that we and you spoke. Because to me, and maybe it's just me, I don't think so though. I believe that you are around your teachers more than you are your parents. Yeah. So your teachers have a responsibility to understand you, see you, and see everything about you.
Right.
And then also teach you those simple things as well. Like truly be the example for you to, treat other people just in that same way. And I think that's the most vital thing about all of it. And I think I do agree, but I do think it's a real weird issue. That's this real weird cultural internal issue that we have about not giving back and not coming back to our neighborhoods and doing those specific things. I think it has a lot to do with it because it usually takes so much to get out. Right. It usually takes so much energy and so you had to work so hard just to kind of get a thing, from people having to, work out and be magnificent at the sport. And I've always said on the show, and the big reason why my tagline is, the Soulfully Conscious Podcast and Humans Simply Being Humans is because I want to truly normalize, that my face and so many, other black faces and other people that I brought onto my show are humans too.
Right.
And I think so often that, especially, in the black community, it's either we are superhuman or subhuman. You're either Michael Jordan or the bum on the street of Chicago. And I think that in between is where all of us really are. And we are so kind of, we just looked over and looked around. But I would love to kind of, dive into something that you did say about, when you were talking about, Patricia Bath and these different women. What type of practices do you kind of, have in your classroom that truly kind of, recognize and uplift? Because that was a big thing that really brought, drew me to you when we were speaking at the holiday party. You were just telling me, it's like, yeah, I talk, I do, kind of, woman sciences of the day, do all these different things. Like, what made you want to do that, and also what are those kind of like things that you do?
Well, so there's a lot of literature on decolonization of education, right? Like making sure that we're not just teaching Western values all the time, because I mean, let's face it, like, you know, like the whole entire idea of like the idea of the melting pot. We're not a melting pot, right? Like there's some people that want to say like we're a stew. All of our flavors combine a little bit, but we still have different segments, right?
Yeah.
And different cultures within it. And but like clearly there's a dominant form of education, right? And that's learning about all the great things that, well, let's plain and simply say it. It's just we learn about all the great achievements of what white males do, right? And then so you grow up, and kids grow up wanting to be possibly, or thinking so highly of these Western cultures that are just mostly dominated by white males. And so what I do, I try and read I begin the year off by having my students draw what they think a scientist is. I give them 10 minutes, and I say, I don't want you to talk. I want to talk to the neighbor, just quietly. And this usually works at the beginning of the year. And by the way, most of my assignments, I want them to talk. I want them to get up. Like I allow my students to get up, move around their tables within parameters, but like move. Like, you know, you can't expect middle school students to sit around all day. But, you know, so yeah, I have them sit down. I have them quietly, beginning of the year, I have them draw a scientist. And I give them 10 minutes. Oftentimes I need to give them about 20 minutes because they get into it, right? And some of them are like, why are we doing this? And I'm like, just there's a point. Let's go there. And they draw them. And so when we have a discussion, I let some of them show them up on the board, and I'm like, you know, tell me why you drew them this way. And you know, we talk about the stereotypes of scientists, right? Like, because scientists are stereotyped in some ways, right? Like, you know, I attribute some of the things that we're dealing with now is the mistrust of science, right? Like, people don't believe in vaccinations anymore, right?
Yeah, I feel like it just came past. I feel like, I don't know, it felt like it just popped up because I don't even remember being young and people talking about that.
No, I mean, within the past like 5-10 years, right? And
Yeah.
so people don't trust scientists on that now. They think they're hiding
measles
something, right?
is back now.
Right. Well, now people got measles, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous. And then you know, the Earth being flat, right? You know, so you have people that are just not trusting science or global climate change. Like, you have people that are not trusting scientists, but NASA has global climate change. Like, you're mistrusting people that sent us to the moon, right? Like, how hard is it? You know how much data you have to pour over. But anyways, regardless. I'm sorry, I digress.
No. Get into your scientist bag, right? Get into your scientist bag.
So where was I? So so we talk about the mistrust of science and like why might that be, right? Like, and then you see like we start talking about things. I'm like, I remember Dexter's Laboratory, the little evil scientist child, right?
It's a great show.
Oh, it was a good show. And then, but like we also talk about like I mean, just like in every single show, Rick and Morty, right? Right.
Great show.
Evil genius scientists, and so like, so almost every single aspect of science, we see evil people in popular culture. People who, or maybe are not evil, but like are trying to do something good and take things too far.
Yes.
Right. That's the way the media portrays scientists, and so we talk about that, and it goes good. But then, you know, I break off from that, and I said, well, be honest with me. And I've seen all your pictures. How many of you drew them as white? You get a bunch of hands, and my kids aren't white. You know. And then I say, all right, ladies, be honest with me. How many of you drew them as male? And you get a bunch of hands. And I've even seen numerous times. I've done this for a couple of years now. They start scribbling in longer hair. And again, like longer hair means that you're not female, or you know, whether or not you're female. But like, again, you see these things, and the kids start changing their pictures, and they recognize what they did, but they also recognize, I did this because this is what I'm told the scientist is, or these are the only role models that I've had that are scientists. Is I read about people who are white.
Yep.
And so I preface that with a book one of my advisors told me about, 50 Women of Science. We read one a day, and we talk about why. We're like, and every single time, you know, I saw a comedian, Joe Rogan.
Yes.
Saw a comedian, Joe Rogan. I saw him on Netflix, and he was joking about what great things did women invent. And I was like, I have this book of female inventors and
that
female
was a joke
scientists.
for him.
Right, it was a joke for him. And I was like, plenty of things, but we don't talk about it because they're being overshadowed by white male culture. And yeah, I mean, just how many people, we just talked about Patricia Batt, how many people can talk about Patricia Batt? How many white males can talk about Patricia Batt? Right?
She did something that's just...
But I didn't know about that because I grew up in learning about dominant white male culture. And so it's kind of been a gift for me to be teaching in an inner city school where I could be learning about these things that not everything that's been great has been about white male culture. There's so many different people that have done so many amazing things, and we just don't hear their stories because they're not the ones writing the textbooks.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful that I think it's so beautiful that you do that. And I think it's so vital that you do that, because not only do you need to know that there's someone that exists that looks like you that could do, it's the options, you know? I think so many people can't just throw away the significance of Obama for so many reasons. And even as black, even in the black community, even if you just did not like him, did not agree with a lot of things he did, you were extremely conservative, whatever it might have been, you still have to give it up that, but he was a great example. Like, he did prove a thing to like all these kids. Like, if you are literally what at this time, that would be 12. Yeah, I guess 16 or something like that.
You know,
you grew up only really knowing, of a black, president. And like, I can only imagine, you know what I'm saying, talking to kids about that, where this, like, Trump is a lot of kids' first white president.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then
I never thought of that.
And then you think about, like, you look back, it's like, dang, so Obama really was the first, and that was the one that I was born into. Feel pretty thankful,
right?
Because that's their first sight. That's who they see, and then they get this imagery. They see how he is, and all these different things, and it definitely perpetuates the sense of you can do anything, you can do everything, and seeing yourself in different spaces and places. I do believe that you need a lot. I think it's interesting how you see so many people fight diversity. Speaking of Joe Rogan, I think his podcast is not only intriguing for the fact that he has, I think to me, Joe Rogan does several things all at once.
He does.
He gives you his platform really is for anyone, but not only that, he presents, honestly to me, he presents like the male psyche.
Yeah.
And all of it's the white male psyche and all of this kind of, in every version. And I don't think you get that in no other podcast. Because he talks to the conservative guy, he talks to the liberal guy, he talks to the, conspiracy guy. And so he gives you almost every single type. And a commonality with a lot of them is they share a lot of different things. They feel that they are, targeted now. They feel that, being white male is like is a derogatory thing now, or better yet, just the fact that they it's like now I can't even have an opinion about like a negative opinion about diversity, and I don't get it. And like, there's no studies that show that a more diverse workplace or more diverse this is better, and this, that, and the third. And it's kind of like you guys missing the point. Because I always fight back on like, it's not even about it just being a better thing. Because you're thinking about things being equal, meaning things are better for you and everyone else. But a wise person once said that equality looks like oppression to those who are privileged.
Right. And I don't mean to interject. But
no, go ahead.
And I think about my curriculum when you say that, because it's like, white males grow up hearing that white males are awesome all the time. You're constantly getting
directly or indirectly
high-fived by the education system by saying, hey, look at this white male and look what they did. Look at this white male and look what they did. And so like
4 or 5.
Right. Absolutely. But like, I mean, just beyond that, just throughout, like, I mean, you read a history book and geez, like the proportion.
Yeah.
Like, despite of what our cultural makeup is just terrible. So it's like when you start hearing things that oppose that white males are great, you're gonna start trying to defend that. Yeah. And it sucks. It's stupid because, like, you know, it's like people aren't taking this perception of like, all right, well, like they had their you know those people had their time in history, whatever, yada yada yada. But like, give other people a voice. And unfortunately, they don't want to do that. Although you could argue that Joe Rogan is giving multiple people voices, but also, I mean, he just had Alex Jones on.
Yeah, he did.
I think there's an argument there that like, fine, you're giving a person the ability to have a platform that you know is spouting. Am I allowed to swear on that?
Yes.
Spouting bullshit. Mm-hmm. You know, so I mean, that's problematic too. But yeah, I do want to also say, just to finish.
1 second.
Oh, go.
And yeah, I think that whole Alex Jones thing was pretty strange to me too. Cause I think, but just like, also he had just a slight tangent. He had Jack Dorsey, I forgot her name, but she's in legal for Twitter, and then Tim Pool, who's this conservative guy on Twitter, who all entered the same room, and Tim Pool was essentially debating that Twitter and other social media sites kind of are very biased to conservative figures and public figures, conservative, influencers and all these different things, because they seem to only remove and ban, these guys. You only ban the Milos and that's and the third, but you never ban this person and that person. And what about Antifa and this and that? Right. And what's intriguing to me is not only do y'all need more color in this situation, but y'all are never going to think y'all need more color into this conversation. Yeah. Because you're thinking of it like from this very privileged position of views. Right. And yes, violence has been incited on these views. And then you claim, people are trying to encroach on your freedom of speech, but let's really break these things down. Right. And I think it's interesting now that you have conservatives who have kind of placed themselves in this place of like, well, I'm not doing anything but speaking my mind. Even if the rhetoric that you're speaking is in fact hateful, it does in fact inspire, maybe not you or anyone connected to you, but a group of individuals to be inspired by you to cause violence to other people. And I think it's the fact that there are people who are coming and trying to stop you doing these things and doing all these different things, who are liberal, who are more open. I think they don't realize, to have some of the things you have to see that you are closed in. You aren't doing these things. You aren't open
Right.
Like, look at all the people around you who have these certain values and views, and how many of you guys are really that diverse? And there are problematic things that are within all those different things, and I think they just don't talk about that enough. But
I agree.
I want us to dive into the solutions.
Yeah.
I love that you understand the miseducation of children of color, black children especially, and I think that's something that's very neat. And I think you're doing beautiful work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because not only is it in a skill that we need to be more in, because we have done so many cool things within it, but I also don't think that children that, like myself, growing up, I didn't realize that what I'm doing now is something that is scientific. I'm literally playing with sound and manipulating sound to do a thing to convey a certain message, which is science.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? We're talking about batteries, we're talking about power, we're talking about wattage, we're talking about
waves,
frequencies, Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So many different lessons can be learned just in the sense of the medium that I'm using, and that's with almost every medium that you use. And I think science is a everywhere type of thing, but it's brought to us truly in the most boring, bland type of way.
Yeah.
It is. But if you specialize and you let it be known, I thought the most brilliant show was you remember a show I think it was like Sports Science or something like that. You remember that show?
So good. Way to connect with people. Just people and just anybody who's into sports, right? Like there's so many people into sports.
I grew appreciation for so many more sports and the skill level of these people.
There's a podcast on that.
Oh, really?
On just sports science. It comes out of the comes out of Star Talks, right? Like the Star Talks, they have the sports science version of it.
Oh, for Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Well, he's not part of it, but
I thought he did have he didn't have a show called.
No, he has Star Talks, but it branched out because they did a segment on sports.
Okay.
And then so they just went with it because so many people were into it. So it's they just have podcasts on the science of sports now.
I get it.
It's pretty cool.
I mean, that's a cool intersection too, because sports podcast is definitely a thing. But I want to get into solutions.
Yeah,
I truly believe in that. Children are certainly miseducated, and to double back into something that you said earlier about the thing that is being missed, and that is that kids are not prepared.
Yeah.
I personally have been saying for almost probably over a year now that what I've always thought was interesting about curriculums and what I've always thought interesting about being an adult is there are certain things that if you told me this 8 to 10 years ago, I would have understood this.
Right.
And even if I wasn't able to do it at that moment, I would have been glad I knew it. And on top of that, the sense of repetition, I understand why that happens, why that's a skill within the education system, repetition, but also if you told me that what the hell a 1044, a 1099, how taxes work, what it means, how credit really operates and what that means, what loans really do to your credit, what are the credit factors, how to manage a budget, a personal budget, not just an accounting budget, which is something that you do when it comes to a balance sheet in accounting and that you may take in high school, but a personal budget. These are reasonable bills. And you can make it as real as possible. Don't just teach me about cost of living. Put me through what cost of living really, how that would really affect me in life. Because this is something I want to do, drill that into me too. Put me through pop quizzes of you have this much money, Billy, and you have this many bills. How will you now pay all your bills, or how will you manage your budget for the month or the year? And you could just do your math like that and just keep adding on to it. This is your salary. You have to pay this much a month. How will you factor in this into your now new budget? You've just got, you have to factor in a bonus now. You have quarterly bonuses. Truly putting in their minds something that is very normal for life. and then they're gonna see it as boring. Because I'm just sitting there thinking, like, how many random word problems did you have in math? Worldly things that you had in science that like were so beyond you. Cassandra is buying apples for her mom. Who buys apples? Just one by one for their mom like that.
Kids don't buy apples.
Yeah, kids don't buy apples. Your parents buy apples. But you know what you do buy? You know, I think that's what's a trick. But I would love to know, what are some... To me, I believe those things should be instituted into the education system. And it can be done just like that. Like, they can be in every class, any class. These are literally adult skills. But I wanted to know, what are the solutions that you have? That's kind of what I would add. I would add adulting into the curriculum.
Well, first of all, one of the things, especially like within inner city school, with fixing that, right, is first of all, like we were talking about that the woman in science thing, right? Like I finish things off. We read that book and we talk about how there's no multiculturalism in science thing, right? Like there's no multiculturalism in science book. So I tell them, let's create our own, right? And I have them research. I let them pick, like, research someone who's not a white man, right? Or
that's the only that's right? the only rubric.
That's the only rule. And like, luckily, I don't have enough white parents that they're not going to put a stink to me.
Yeah, like, why are you doing
that? Like, what's wrong with white men? But the other thing is that, I want them. I also include like LGBTQ, like let's go for an LGBT Turing. Like most people don't know that the first almost pretty much computer came from Alexander Turing, a gay male, right? And so when the British laws at that time were criminalizing gay males, he ended up having to go to a psychologist. He ended up killing himself. The guy who basically he saved World War II by creating the decoding the Enigma machine, right? So
what is that?
So the German scientists had a code that reset like 20. There's a movie about it, the Imitation Game. It's really good. And so the German scientists had this they had this code that reset every 24 hours, so nobody could decode it.
Damn.
Yeah, and so
what they used the code for?
So like positions of like submarines and stuff like that. So they were winning World War II up until this time. And
so it was like the first algorithm. Right.
And so like Alexander Turing comes up with a machine, the Turing machine, that decodes the Enigma machine, but he has to do it within 24 hours. And his team has to do it within 24 hours every single time. This machine led to modern day computing, and he ended up saving. Many would say that he ended up saving the war. But then, after finding out he was a gay male, they decided it was a psychological issue.
You need to go see somebody,
right? And then he ended up killing himself because he just wasn't accepted in society, right? And so, I mean, that's sad.
Because you can't be this important and be gay,
right? Exactly. So, and I highly recommend the movie. But so, anyways, so we do a project, Multiculturalism Science. We, they produce a piece of art. We try and put together a book. So I tried it last year. I'm going to do it this year. I really hope to like put together a book and try and like bound it and publish it. I think that would be awesome.
That's dope.
So like just anyone that's not like any scientists that aren't white males, because anybody that would come back to me about that, I'd be like, hey, like, we read enough about white male scientists. Like, let's talk about some that aren't. So, like, I give them resources to find, like, African scientists, Asian scientists, Puerto Rican and Hispanic scientists, South America, Central American scientists. And just, like, because people feel better about researching scientists that are like them. And it's just, like, that's important, is to realize that there are scientists that are like you, because like you can't just sit there and be around, like your education can't be being around hearing about the glory of white males. On top of that, I appreciate like what you said about like like what I'm bringing into my classroom and stuff like that. But like the other solution is teachers developing empathy, right? If you're going to be in an inner city school and you're a white person, because like I recognize that's a thing, right? Like I'm walking into an inner city school and I'm a white person and I don't have the same exact experiences, and I'm never ever going to know exactly what those experiences are. But what I could do is I could attempt to develop empathy. I can read. And I think that's like one of the best.
Ask children too.
Ask the children about their experiences. Read about what it means to be a Hispanic or Black individual, right? And within this country, one of the big flipping points of like me learning more about that was reading like a lot about like Michael Eric Dyson. I love his reading. I read one of his books, which was like a sermon to white people of like what I want you to know about my experiences, and it was very eye opening. But like, or I read in college, I read about a book about, and I can't remember exactly what the book was about because it was long enough ago.
Yes.
But it was about an individual who ended up getting a free ride to Brown and came from an inner city school, and in a Black male who was just so confused, and it's just trying, like seeking literature that can get you in. That's the best way to get into a mindset of a person, is trying to seek literature that helps you to do so. Because I'm never going to be there, right?
Yeah.
Like I will never have that.
That's
but I do want to know best I can so I can better serve my students, because I care about them and I love them.
Yeah.
And but to answer the real question, right, of like testing versus skills, right? To me, I think that we need to like go through education and say, do we really need this anymore?
I love it. I love it.
We need a filter of like, is this still relevant? Do I need to graph linearly anymore? No, I could do so on a computer.
Yeah.
Right? And I stopped teaching my kids that, right? Like when we do graphing, I teach them how to input the data. I teach them tools. Learn how to use tools. Stop learning how to memorize stuff.
They can start using Excel in the middle school.
Absolutely. And you know what? They are. My kids are. And they get it. And they understand it. Even my students who struggle with math are like, oh, I could input this stuff and it gives me all the answers. Why am I teaching them how to graph a linear equation anymore when it can give me the entire linear equation?
Yeah.
And I get that some people are like, oh, they need the background, yada yada. But your job is not going to require that of you anymore.
Nope.
Right?
And I think it's that realism. It's taking that step out of it and assuming a thing, because it does not matter, and there's a possibility this very thing will be discontinued. Like, I feel like I remember asking people who came behind me if they were still learning cursive in school, and most of them aren't. And I'm like, why did I learn it?
You know, I get why they need to for a signature, but like after that, that's
Then
it.
what?
Then what? Right? Like
Then what?
Everything's being typed these days. You type everything these days. Even most of the assignments you're typing, right?
Yeah.
So like, there's no point. There's really no point. You shouldn't. Why is there an entire curriculum behind that? The real reason why I say like, why do we need all this stuff? Why do we need to start trimming down the fat of like what we're learning? Why do we need to stop memorizing things and start getting kids into a position where, well, they need to get the future jobs, right? Like the future jobs, you know, John Oliver just did a great segment on this, is automation, right? Like, and everyone was worried in the industrial period, or when industrialization first started taking effect, everyone was worried. All the jobs are going to go away. Machines do this better than us, right? Well, what happened? They found new jobs. New jobs were created out of the new discoveries and the new inventions. Well, here's the thing: is like now we're starting to develop AI. Now we're starting to develop drones. Now we're starting to develop self-driving cars. There's this great book by Ted Dintersmith about It's called Most Likely to Succeed. And it talks about how we're not teaching our students to succeed. They say he claims that about 70% of all the jobs that are going to exist in the future, my kids' future, and I say my kids as in my students, haven't been created yet. Mm-hmm. So I tell my kids all the time, are you going to fight for those 30%? Or are you going to fight for it? Or are you going to work towards getting to that 70% of the jobs that haven't been created yet? Because fighting for the 30% are the jobs that require memorization and the ability to do
a single task over and over.
A task over and over, right? The 70% are going to require critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
So how do you fix these issues, and how do you fix these issues in inner city schools? You decolonize the curriculum. You make sure that they recognize that, in my opinion, you make sure that they recognize that there are people that are like them that are doing awesome things.
Decolonize the curriculum. That's a t-shirt.
Yeah. Second thing is you tell or you teach the kids skills and you teach them critical thinking. Mm-hmm. Once you start doing that, they can adjust to any job that they need to be in. Mm-hmm. Stop teaching them to memorize.
Teach them to be adept.
But that's what tests are doing. That's what assessments are doing. Mm-hmm. That's what these standardized tests are doing. They're and that's what our funding comes from, or where our funding comes from is from their scores. So until teachers start saying, hey, we need to start teaching these kids to be productive citizens for our future and not care about these test scores, we're not gonna fix the problem. So we need to start teaching kids critical thinking. We need to start to teach them tools. We need to start teaching them how to use technology, because it's learning slope-intercept form is obsolete.
I hated slope-intercept form.
No one liked it.
And I can't remember what it was for.
Y equals mx plus b.
Damn. What a time. What a time. Nate, I think we've said so much, and I think we've done a show. We've done a great show.
I really appreciate it.
I think this is great. I think this is exactly the conversation I expected to. So I really am glad we got together and made this happen. And I'm glad it's happening and when it happened, because I think it's vital. I think education is coming to a really interesting shift because it had to. I think we are in an age where the children that are coming up now have the future and the past in the palm of their hands, because they have the internet. They can read things from, things that are, on the brink of happening that haven't happened yet, and the things that have happened in the past. And I think that puts us in a really interesting place for the paradigm to shift. On top of what I said earlier about, seeing diversity within one of the highest places of government, I think it's very, very, very influential, and it can't be really shaken off. And I think that's what's going to truly fight back any of those very oppressive and very regressive ways of thinking that the country, I feel like, has historically always had within these younger children of all races. And I think the work that you do in education should be not only seen as something that is valuable, but should be rewarded as such as well. And I think it's sad that, you so often throughout my whole life I always have heard about, or seen, my teachers out, which is always very strange to see your teachers out of school. and seeing them like working at Macy's and doing other jobs and other things. It always was crazy to me, because it was like, you at school every day, you're not getting paid. You ain't getting paid enough.
Summers I do landscaping and dog washing, man.
That's the crazy thing, but I think systems like you see in, Finland and Switzerland, where, education is propped up to literally be one of the most respectable professions, and damn near seen on that saying, and they're getting paid, and the students are happy, and they're literally tested higher than almost every other country. I think it's by no mistake. So I think those things are vital. Those things are things that people, I feel like, need to keep fighting for. Shout out to all of the different, boycotts and strikes that are happening all over, because I feel that, a lot of those are come from a good place and come from a place of wanting to not only teach their kids but also survive while they're teaching their kids, which I think is something to fight for. Because I can only imagine being a disgruntled teacher and expecting them to, maintain, 50 children a day, or various amounts of, and then also do other things and have other responsibilities in their own personal lives. So you're doing great work and doing a work that a lot of people wouldn't even dare even try to do. But this is the Soulfully Conscious Podcast for Humans Simply Being Humans. Before I say that, I would love for all of you to, support your local communities. Even if you aren't a parent, find out if there's any ways that you can actually, get involved within the school system and your public school systems, no matter what city you're in, no matter what county you may be in, rural or urban. There may be a way for you to help, maybe a way for you to assist, and trust me, they always need some type of, assistance, some type of help, no matter what the situation is. So figure out a way to be involved, and also, if you have solutions, suggestions, and any type of resources, provide them. Probably bring a proposition, and it definitely could probably help a lot. Go ahead.
And, based on what you said, just to educate your child, just going back, it takes a village, right?
It takes a village, and takes a village, and the teachers are a part of that village. So I implore everyone who are parents, ones who are about to be parents, and people who are going to be parents in the future to be extremely engaged and literally treat your teachers how you treat your barbers and your hairdressers. You need to have their numbers. You need to be able to hit them up. You need to understand when their birthdays are, who their kids are, who the type of people they are, what they do, because that right there will make sure that when your child acts up, that damn, Mr. Smith gonna tell my damn mom, and I'm gonna be in trouble when I get home because I ain't do this little bit of homework. Trust me, It works, it helps. I've seen it. I've seen it work and help. So we got it's a community. It's a community thing. So love the work you do. Love all teachers that are teaching all around the world. Love my teachers. Shout out to one of my faves, Miss Holloway, and I believe we did a great show. You can follow me everywhere at Kings_Memoirs. Follow the show at Simply King Pod on Instagram. You can listen to me everywhere from SoundCloud to Spotify to Google Play to Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you listen. Make sure you leave a review. Appreciate y'all. This is the Soulfully Conscious Podcast for Humans Simply Being Humans. I'm Rodney Perry, and this is Simply King. Peace.
Body slam 'em. Those who dispute get treated just like a prostitute. They get the boot and blade like a flute, so just play mute. Don't even whisper. Open your mouth to speak, and I'ma dish your ragtagging dog. Put you in the morgue because you're petty, confetti, and not ready to rock steady. In other words, you're half-stepping, tiptoeing, get going. Because my weapon is not a 9, a Uzi, or a shotgun. But when it come to hype rhymes, I got one. Just like the album is still